What's great about the Starmer plan is three specific special reasons. Firstly, it'll help us, get us through the winter by backdating the windfall tax back to January. The money's coming from the companies that are just swimming in cash. I mean, Aramco made 49 billion in the last 3 months. It's obscene. So it's very, very good from that point of view. It's also very good from another point of view. The biggest problem we face right here and now is industrial strife. It's the strikes all over the place. And why is everybody striking? Because of cost of living. And we all know that if everybody in this country simply had a pay rise, all that would happen is inflation would rocket, people would then be dragged into the tax bracket when what's called fiscal drag, and nobody would be any better off. So by actually removing the cause of the discontent, then that actually goes a long way to making this country a bit more peaceful. And thirdly, what's really crucial is that the Starmer plan isn't just about today. The curse of politics is short-termism. He's actually talking about what happens in 2-3 years' time, because we're going to be faced with a long, long period of high energy costs. He's talking about nuclear, onshore, offshore wind. He's talking about tidal. He's talking about solar. He's talking about all the things that make Liz Truss wake up in the night cursing and swearing. But I have to say, this is such a good scheme that I'm pretty bloody sure the Tories, when they kind of wake up from their zombie half sleep, will actually probably pinch it from us.
Well, I think there'll be a lot of people out there hoping that they indeed will. But there must be a reason why this isn't being done. There must be a reason, actually, why Liz Truss wants to potentially reverse windfall taxes. And that's because these big companies' profits shore up things like pensions. And also, if you start taxing big business when they happen to be doing well, what are you going to do when they're also struggling? Which, of course, energy companies have done in the past. I mean, it's a quick fix, dirty solution, isn't it?
No, it's not. It's not a quick fix. What's really good about this is actually it's sensible, serious, and pragmatic and long-term. And I think that's what's really, really... Look, the real problem here is the dividing line is ideology. There is a theory, among sort of hardcore Tories that money should fructify in the pockets of the people, and that somehow the marginal propensity to consume will somehow raise living standards. It's all cobblers. I mean, if people haven't got money to spend, they can't spend it. And the idea of cutting tax is going to unleash the great sleeping giant of British capitalism and public consumption. I mean, that's cobblers. We've been there before. It simply doesn't work. We have all the velocity of capital arguments. We can talk about that. The reality is that people today are very much worried about 8:30, not just 2030. And we've got to actually have solutions that apply for today and for tomorrow and the day after. The one lacuna in this whole thing, which I have to say, I don't speak to Keir, not since we had a game of football in Norfolk a couple of years ago. Nothing dodgy happened, I hasten to add. But the one thing that we do need to actually incorporate in this is business. Because at the moment, business is not affected by the energy cap. The energy cap on domestic consumption at the moment is, 1,197 or something. If we keep it to that, rather than the 4,000 that would go up otherwise, then we do a huge favour for the domestic consumer. Now, I appreciate business women and businessmen are also domestic consumers. But, as you touched on in your intro, a lot of factories are simply not going to be able to afford this. So what we need to do is to address the issue not just of the domestic consumer, but also of business.
I mean, you talk about Starmer having long-termism. I think successive governments for about 2 decades have talked about creating a smorgasbord of energy options for the country, and none of them have delivered on it. But how on earth is that going to be funded if you're whacking whopping great taxes, even retrospectively, on energy companies who are the ones who are supposed to invest in renewables? And this is going to cost, if this was rolled out for the course of the year, 60 billion Stephen pounds. Where's the money going to come from?
Look, back in the day, when you maybe were just a blush on your mother's cheek. I remember Margaret Thatcher when she introduced the windfall taxes back in the 80s. And everybody said, you're going to kill enterprise, you're going to actually kill business. And she pointed out that any business that's making that amount of profit has to exist in society, has to exist in the real world, has to exist in the community. And there's an obligation on that. It didn't work then. Thatcher, and please don't quote me on this too often, but Thatcher was absolutely right when she defended windfall taxes. Now, the idea that business people around the world are going to say, stone me, the Labour government or the Tory government or anybody in England is going to actually start hitting our obscene profits means we're not going to invest. Well, I've got news for you. The energy companies aren't flipping British anyway. They owe us nothing. They're all French and German because they've all been flogged off and sold off. If we had a sensible policy in a few years' time when we can afford to actually bring the energy companies back into public ownership, because frankly, we couldn't afford it at the moment. But when we can do that, then we can actually talk about the national interest. At the moment, the national interest is spoken in French or with a German accent, and that cannot be right.